This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
What do you think, good dog? What should be our secret word today? Should it be staples? How about staples? Does that sound good? Today's secret word is staples.
If I take my time.
Welcome, everyone. So we're going to have an interesting show today. We have Doug the producer, as always, and those of you who are regular listeners know Doug's secret. Thank you, Doug, for producing the show, making it great, and the fans out there know about Doug's secret. That's why he is so beloved. So we've got Doug, but we also have a couple of other non-human guests today. We have my dire wolf here, Havoc. Havoc, say hi to everybody. And we have Pippin. These are two of our three dogs. We have three dogs, and Mary, Pippin's twin sibling, is downstairs. She just got fixed. And so I have to have these fellows up here because she just got spayed, and she has to be kept separate from them. So Pippin wants to say hi to everybody. Those of you who are listening, I am holding up a dog who is part border collie, part Boston Terrier. So if you are a mouse or a rat and you are out there watching YouTube and suddenly you are very afraid, that's with good reason, because this is a mouser of a dog, aren't you? Otherwise, just kind of a doofus. But you know, if you're a rat, then this is an incredibly practical enemy that has been bred to destroy you. Havoc, on the other hand, is a wolf. If you're looking at Havoc and you're like, that dog looks like a full-on wolf with a collar on, that's weird. That's because Havoc is a wolf. Havoc, come here. Come here. Havoc, if you can see Havoc there on the screen, is an eighth wolf. Also husky and German Shepherd and Malamute, something else. So these two are going to join me, and we'll see how this goes. If they are making noise, chewing on their bones or whatever. Often they're super chill. When I've recorded a couple of episodes, and the listeners have never known that Havoc was curled up on my feet. Havoc weighs 90 pounds, and so when Havoc decides that he needs to be close to me and curls up on my feet while I write for, hours at a time, I'll then stand up, a couple hours later, take a break, and there is no blood left in my toes whatsoever. And that's the way Havoc shows love. And I appreciate it. It's actually exactly the kind of dog that I, as a writer, wanted. I wanted, besides the fact that I now get to be a writer with a dire wolf, which is awesome. Let's admit it. But also, I want a dog who wants to curl up on my toes while I write. That's just, that's part of the persona that I am, intentionally adopting. The writer with a wolf who's curled up on his feet while he writes novels for you. So these guys are going to join me, and we'll see how that goes. But it's going to be a little bit of an interesting show today because, besides Doug and the Pooches, we don't have another author guest. And I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about open submissions. NotAPipePublishing is open for submissions and will be for the next couple of weeks through August 16th. And I thought it might be fun to go through our submission requirements and talk a little bit about the process by which we choose the books that we're going to publish, as something that could be helpful to authors, to readers. This should be a reader-focused show, so I'm not going to be diving into this in a kind of hopefully overly technical way, but it might be interesting for folks who are readers out there to learn about the process by which the books that you love come to be. They go from manuscript to published book that you can purchase in the store. So here's how the process works, at least for us, and it is different for other publishers. It is different for what we call the Big Five. So those are the large publishing companies. For those, the way that it tends to work is that an author doesn't submit their manuscript to those publishers. Instead, they submit them to agents. And that agent is somebody who, if they select you, works with you, tries to sell your book for you to one of the Big Five, who will then give you a big advance. I guess I could talk a little bit about how advances work, but important thing about agents first. So agents are wonderful people in the kind of process. They are gatekeepers, and they are the people who say no, and they are deeply, deeply resented by authors who don't have agents yet. And that's because if you're an author and you don't have an agent yet, your experience with agents is these are the people who just keep saying no to you. And boy, do authors continuously complain about agents because an agent said yes too fast, which means they didn't read my book carefully enough. Or an agent said yes too slowly, which means my book was just sitting there waiting on somebody else's approval. Or the agent gave me feedback and I didn't like that and I'm mad. Or the agent gave me no feedback because they don't have time. And so, these evil, awful agents. And then you get to know these folks and they're wonderful. The thing people need to understand about agents is an agent should be working for the authors they have signed. And so the authors that they have signed love their agents. This is a person who is helping you through the whole process. If you don't love your agent, get a different agent. But by and large, authors who have agents really like their agents. It's people who don't have agents who are like, agents, they're terrible. Well, that's because that person's not working for you, right? And they shouldn't be. You don't want an agent who's spending all their time on unagented writers. That person should be devoting their time and energy to the authors they have signed, and that's a good agent. So the agent who says no to you too fast, or maybe doesn't provide you with all the feedback you want, is actually probably a better agent, because that means they're focusing their time on the authors that they have signed. So then they go to the Big Five and they sit down for these pitch meetings and they say, here is this book, and they've already worked with the author to say, how can we make this thing the most sellable possible? And they do the pitch, and that's how that side of the business works. Once you get through that, it gets to be a little bit more like it is for a small press. So for a small press, or for an agent, you craft a very specific kind of letter called a query letter. And this letter has specific parts, and it is designed in a very specific way. Lots of authors get really frustrated because it's really condensed. And they've written this thing that took them, 10 years to write, and it's this huge book, and they've got all the details of the book in their heads, and somebody says, okay, now sell it to me in a page. And that's hard. But basically it says, here's what the story is about. This is why this is a great story. Here's who it's for. Here's why there are lots of people who will want to read this story. And here's me. And that's tough. 3 paragraphs, right? How do you pull that off? These are not easy letters to write, but they are really important because that agent, or in my case, the small press publisher, does not have time to read all of your book. You're giving them a way to decide, is this one that I should read, right? And so you grab them with that first paragraph, and then you talk about how this is going to be really successful because you've got a market in mind, and what you're going to do to make that successful. In my case, because maybe you don't do that for an agent. Maybe for an agent, you are entrusting them to be part of the publishing process. Although realistically, even in that case, I think it probably wouldn't hurt to acknowledge you will have to be part of the selling of your book. But let them know that you're going to how you're going to engage in the selling of the book. and anything about you. And this is really tricky for debut authors because, so many of the models that you can find out there online are like, I've been published in this journal and I've been published in this place, this short story published, and I've got these books, right? Well, if you're a debut novelist, maybe you have a short story or two out there or not, and you've got a book, right? And that's tough. In that case, it is better to, you can skip that. Right? You don't have to say, by the way, just say I'm a debut novelist. This is my first book. That's fine, right? Publishers, agents will respect that rather than, saying I have 12 followers and I, once published something in my, high school newspaper. Like, don't say things that aren't particularly flattering to you. Just acknowledge I'm starting off, and that's okay. So let's say you're an author, you've got this query letter, you've got this manuscript, and you're getting ready to send it off. Now you've got to find a place that's the right home for it. And for some folks, that's an agented, going for the big five, no shade. That is absolutely a path. It might not be the right path for your book. Could be that your book has a smaller potential audience. Could be that your book is a little bit more experimental. Could be that your book is in a genre or subgenre that the big five aren't interested in right now. And that doesn't mean your book won't be successful. That just means that it's not for them in this moment, right? And so you could go to a small press. And that'd be somebody like us. And small presses focus a little more we've got a brand. This is what we do, right? And so I wanted to share a little bit about NotAPipe's, what we're interested in. And the way that you find that is on the submission guidelines. And whether somebody is an agent or a small press, they will tell you, these are our submission guidelines. And you really want to abide by those. If you've never heard the story of Van Halen's Green M&Ms, Eddie Van Halen, so the story goes, it might be apocryphal, but the story is that when a rock band is going to a new city, they send ahead of them what's called a rider. This is this big document that is the description of what they need when they show up at that place so that the concert will be all set. And for Van Halen, they had this big, thick rider, right? And at the end, it said, oh, and there needs to be a bowl of green M&Ms sitting in the green room for the band when they walk in. And this, got out, and people were like, what divas? Somebody has to sit there and pick through a bag of M&Ms and find all the green ones and leave them a bowl of just green M&Ms. That's terrible. That's snotty. That's awful. How terrible are these rock stars? Well, the reason they did it actually is really sensible. So much of that big document, that rider, were descriptions of things that would make them safe on stage. This is how we need the lighting to be set up. This is how we need the electrical equipment to be set up. This is how we need the pyrotechnics to be set up. This is how the security situation needs to be set up to keep us safe on your stage. And if they walked into that green room and there wasn't a bowl of green M&Ms, they had a pretty good guess that somebody hadn't read the rider carefully. Seeing that green M&Ms bowl let them know somebody actually took this seriously. We can go out on that stage tonight and our pyrotechnics are not going to be aimed at us, right? And the lights aren't going to fall on us and we're not going to get electrocuted when the rain scene interacts with the microphones and electrocutes all of us. So that your submission guidelines are a bit like that. One of the things you are communicating by following the submission guidelines is that you read the submission guidelines. And so right away, when you do things like formatting, it may seem like, oh, is this person being persnickety? But it's a way of communicating you've taken those seriously. Now, that doesn't mean that, we're going to say you must write it in this font. And if it's not in this weird font, then we know you didn't read the submission guidelines. We're not playing gotcha, right? But if it's clear to us you didn't read the submission guidelines, what that clues us in on at NotAPipePublishing, and I bet this goes for other folks, is probably you're going to be really tough to work with after this. And we're not just looking for a manuscript. We are looking for a relationship with an author who's going to play ball, right? Who's going to work with us, who's going to try and get their book into readers' hands, because that's the point, right? So, for example, if we say we're accepting submissions from August 5th to August 16th, don't send them on August 4th. Don't send them on August 17th, right? Without acknowledging, hey, I know I'm late, right? Because it is important to communicate that you are going to be somebody that we can work with. One of the things we do, and I wish more places would do this when I was querying, this was not often done, we send an email basically right away in reply, just saying we got it. And that's because as an author, I remember what it was like wondering, is this piece out there? Did it get to them? And so even before we've read it, we'll send you a little email just saying received, we'll get back to you, right? And I think that that's just a kindness that I can offer to authors out there. You know, one less thing in terms of their anxiety. And we encourage them to send us a query letter and just the first 10 pages. And I know, as an author, I know that's frustrating because a lot of folks out there are saying, but you know, my book really gets going on page 30. And if you only read the first 10 pages, do you know if it's any good? The reason we do that is if your manuscript does not grab me in 10 pages, it's probably not going to sell. Because the person who is making that purchasing decision probably decides within the first page. The first single page. This is one of these things I learned early on when I started publishing in terms of how people make their purchasing decisions. And this really is helpful. The cover really matters a little bit for a short period of time. The front cover gets them to the back cover. Actually, we should even start outside of that. The spine is designed to get them to look at the front cover. Right? That's the spine of your book is thoughtfully designed to get somebody to look at the front cover. The front cover is designed to get them to turn it over and read the back cover copy. Then, once people read the back cover copy, often still in the bookstore, they'll open it up and read the first page. They're not going to stand in the bookstore and read the first 30 pages of your book to decide whether or not they want to purchase it. But they might read the first page and go, yep, I'm going to get this. Maybe they'll decide based on the back cover copy. Maybe they'll decide based on your name on the front cover if you've already built up that reputation. But if you have not, that first page, you don't get to be Stephen King and take 60 pages of just world building about your small town in Maine. Stephen King does, because people will read that first page. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love that experience of being immersed and getting to know the characters before the monster appears. But Stephen King didn't get to do that for his first book. You don't either, right? Until you've got that reputation, you can't rest on your name. You've got to grab them on page 1. So that's why we just ask for the first 10 pages, because sometimes we can say to ourselves, okay, the first couple weren't great, but we can work with this author because this really gets going, right? But those first 10 pages have got to grab us, right? If they do, we then send them an email and say, we really are excited about this. We would like a full manuscript. Just in terms of numbers, we could easily get 100 query letters in a week. So please understand, just getting that full, and you'll see people on Twitter, I got a request for a full. And what they mean is somebody requested the full manuscript. And so you've gone from then 100 to maybe 5, right? And that's a fun day for me when I get to send those requests for fulls. It's a very, very sad day when I have to send out those 95 rejections. Of course, I'm sending them out one at a time as I go, but I don't like saying no to people. I don't like rejecting people. It's not fun, but it's a part of the process. It's something that has to be done. Then I get to send these people requests for fulls. Then we read their books. We don't, and I'm going to be upfront with you, we don't always read all of them. Because again, if we can tell 100 pages in, this is a great idea, but this manuscript is a mess. The person really cleaned up those first 10 pages, but then it's a mess in terms of its organization or its characters or whatever. We will stop because again, we have to say, is this going to grab readers? Is this going to hook readers? And it's subjective. There could be the next agent, the next publishing company might say they loved everything about it. I know that, and I also know as an author, it is really hard to get those rejections. So then we've got those 5, and then in a year like this year, we might get down to 1. We're a small press, right? So we may only publish a new book who is a new author to us, because we've got to publish the sequels of the authors we've already signed, right? We signed 3-book deals with some folks, and so their sequels will be coming out. So that's really, really tough. I keep saying we, and I should make that clear. I don't make all these decisions on my own. We have a committee of folks who are working together to do that, to go through these. And the way that we do it is we have a spreadsheet that we're all filling out together. So everybody is reading all of those query letters and saying, I think this one is, I'm really interested in it, and we're deciding together. And it could be that there's one person on that committee who says, I am really interested in this. I'm kind of going to override you all. I really want to make sure I read this full manuscript. And it could be that you have 3 people saying, I could take it or leave it, and one person who says, no, this I found really, really repellent and objectionable, and I don't want to read this. And the other 3 of us say, I can see where you're coming from, right? So it's really valuable to me to have that group. And we can talk those things through, because there are things that I, as a cishet white guy, don't see, right? And I need to be open to somebody else on the committee saying, hey, as a person of color, hey, as a woman, as somebody who's in the LGBTQIA plus community, right? This is what I'm noticing that you're not noticing about this. This is not going to work, right? So that group gets together. We have those talks. We send those things out, and then we make those decisions. Now, what is not a pipe picking? So here's what we tell folks we're looking for. And this was actually kind of fun to write. And I think it is helpful. It's designed to be helpful if you are out there and you are saying, should I submit to NotAPipePublishing? Or if, as a reader, if you're saying, should I be checking out NotAPipePublishing stuff? Understand, this was the submission guidelines. We do young adult and what we call mass market genre fiction. So mass market genre fiction is the term adult fiction is, sounds like, what exactly is that? So mass market is the term that is used in the industry for, it's for everybody, but really it's more focused on adults, right? And then young adult is, 15 to, 20, and ideally everybody older, right? You'd love to have a young adult book that also reaches mass market appeal. We call those crossover books. So that would be great. But one of the things we really watch out for is some publishing companies are so focused on that crossover appeal that they end up putting out books that young people don't like. And we have enough folks who work with young people every single day, like me, that if I'm going to put out a young adult book, I want to make sure it's something my students would like to read, and not just their parents would like them to read, right? So we do young adult and mass market genre fic. Genres, we're really interested in fantasy, fairies, witches, vampires, elves, that kind of, whether it is urban fantasy, whether it is epic high fantasy, we love that kind of stuff. Science fiction or speculative fiction, cli-fi, solar punk, political dystopias, Afrofuturism, aliens, space exploration. Love it, right? So that is an area we really enjoy. Paranormal. We like creepy. The thing about horror is we like scary. We're fine with scary. We don't like torture porn. And not yucking anybody's yum. If somebody out there, wants that, that's fine. But we say in our submission guidelines, creepy is cool, but if your horror verges on torture porn, it's just not our thing, right? That's not for us. Humor. Especially if there's a fantasy or a sci-fi twist. If somebody has just written a literary fiction book, literary fiction just means it doesn't fall into any other genre and somebody thinks it's good. Good, right? Of course, we want all of our writing to be really well written. So the literary moniker is not a particularly good one either. You could write a fantasy novel that's really well written, and people will go, oh, because it's well written, it's literary. Okay, no, it's genre fiction that's just high quality. But when it doesn't fall into any other genre, because it's set in our universe and it's set in our time period, people will just say, oh, literary. And if your literary is funny, then it's humor. Then it's relegated to this other category, humor. And for us, we would prefer that the humor is fantasy or sci-fi or paranormal, right? That it fits with our brand a little bit better. Same thing with romance. Love romance, but for us, we don't do historical romance, for example. It's just not our thing. But fantasy, sci-fi twist to the romance, romantasy, they're calling it now. Love it, right? So that's cool. And then poetry. When it comes to poetry, poetry is often sold in two different forms. So there are collections and there are chapbooks. And chapbooks are published differently. They are published with a staple, a pair of staples on the binding rather than a binding, right? And we don't do chapbooks. There's just no market for them. I shouldn't say there's no market for them. People produce chapbooks and sell chapbooks. But chapbooks tend to be things that people sell when they like go to signings and they're like $4. And legit, that's a way to get your work out there into the world. But we tend to publish collections. And so we'd be looking at something that's 100-ish pages, which may be 50 poems. It depends on the length of your poems, of course, right? So we're looking for full collections there. And then we are particularly interested in underrepresented characters and writers from marginalized communities. So that can mean that you are a writer who is a person of color or a member of the LGBTQIA plus community or a religious group that is not the dominant religion or whatever. Or it could mean that you've done the work to make sure that you have a representation of characters that is accurate, that is representative, and that you really understand how to depict a character rather than speaking for a community, right? Which is a tough thing to figure out. And so if that's something you are at all concerned about with a manuscript of yours, I highly recommend getting a sensitivity reader. Even if you don't, we will, right? But it would be, you'll have a better chance of getting published if it's gotten some sensitivity reading first, and then we get our own sensitivity reader to kind of look at it and say, okay, you're getting this right. We generally focus on novels or full-length poetry collections. We're willing to consider novellas and book-length short story collections. We've done anthologies by multiple authors in the past, and we may come back and do that again. But novellas, novellas, yeah, we'll see. We're putting out a novel that's a shorter novel this next year that kind of is in that gray area between novel and novella, and I'm excited to see how that one does. The book is it is just hilariously funny, and so I hope that one works. I hope folks don't look at that and say the book looks small. Instead, say, oh, this is really fun, and it's a fast read, and it's hilarious. We're absolutely willing to consider those as well. We are not looking for, and we say this upfront, and I think this is good for folks to check. Anything that promotes racism, religious bigotry, misogyny, homophobia, we say right there on the submissions page, you have the right to your opinions. We have the right to tell you to F right off, right? We are not going to be the platform for any kind of hatred. We want to make the world a better place, not a worse place. And so, you get to have your opinions. We are not obligated to promote them. We're not really into military or spy thrillers unless there's a fantasy or sci-fi twist. Not that those are bad. I enjoy them myself. John le Carre. I've read, all the James Bond books. But that's the ones that I've enjoyed the most are like the fantasy spins on those, right? So that's more what we're focused on. Same thing, crime novels or detective stories. We did one time, and it was because it had a really strong social justice theme that it was bigger than just here, detectives doing their work. It was about something larger, and so we would consider that. Religion, unless it's define religion, right? Unless it's about mythological creatures, that kind of thing, which, were the characters of a religion at one time. Totally, we're into that. We would love mythology, but we don't tend to do anything that is certainly that's pushing any particular religion. Again, not, because we dislike any particular religious group, but you don't want us. We can't get you into the hands of a religious market. There are actually distinct bookstores, Christian bookstores, for example, and we just don't have the connections to get you into Christian bookstores. So if that's what you're writing, good luck to you. We're not the right place for you. Excessive violence. We've bent on this a little bit in the past. If a story is good enough, we can handle it if it is necessary for the story. We just don't want the violence to be the point of the story, right? Oh, that's the blood and gore is gross. That cannot be what the book is about for us. Again, some people, that's fine. Similarly, erotica. We don't yuck your yum. It's just not our thing, right? That's not what we focus on. Memoir, autobiography, biography, really any kind of nonfic. The reason we don't do that is not because there's anything wrong with memoirs or biographies or nonfiction. In fact, nonfiction makes more money. But we don't do it because we don't have fact checkers and we don't have a big enough liability insurance policy. If you're going to publish something like that, you have to have somebody who's willing to take the legal risk that if there are inaccuracies in the text, so you're writing your memoir and you talk about Uncle Bob and you say a bunch of disparaging things, and then Uncle Bob sues your publisher, right? And for the inaccuracies, we don't have the ability to call up everybody who is in your memoir and find out and get their approval, life rights, things like that. That's just not in our wheelhouse. We're a small press, right? So those aren't ours. Children's picture books, we don't do them, and it's not because we don't love them. I love, just the other day, I bought a copy of A is for Alien. That's a children's picture book of the story of aliens to teach in my sci-fi lit class. I love and have deep respect for the whole world of, illustrated books, whether those are for adults or children. We just can't afford to print them. They cost more to print. We did make an exception this year for a book of poetry by the brilliant poet Jennifer Rood. And if you watch this show, you saw her episode, and she does artwork with her poetry. So it's kind of an experiment to see, because it costs us significantly more to print these beautiful full color images. Are people willing to pay more for a book with full color images? We'll find out. But that's why we are probably not the house for your children's picture book. Similarly, middle grade. Here's the thing with middle grade. I love a good middle grade book, right? You can write a middle grade book that again has what we call crossover appeal, where, I'm 48, I can enjoy a good middle grade book. Here's the trick with middle grade. Unlike YA, middle grade readers generally are not making their own purchasing decisions. The purchasers of middle grade tend to be parents, teachers, and then here's the big one, Scholastic Book Fair, right? Remember when you got your books at Scholastic, right? And so until we have those connections and can get your middle grade book into a Scholastic Book Fair in every, elementary school and middle school in this country, we're just not the right place for you. Like I want your book to be successful. Go to a place that can make your book successful. So that's why we don't do middle grade. So here's how folks submit to us. They write that query letter, they write those 10 pages, and they send that in, and they put query in the subject line. That way we see that, okay, this is one of the queries. And they can just address it to me, Benjamin Gorman, even though there'll be a committee. I'm on the committee. They send that into me, and then we go through that process. We talk about, on the submissions page, don't put in attachments because of virus concerns. We're not going to click on anything. And this is important. Some places don't accept what are called simultaneous submissions. So they're concerned that they're going to spend their time reading your query letter and then say to you, hey, we really like it, we're interested. And you'll say, sorry, I already sold it somewhere else. And so they say very clearly, we do not accept simultaneous submissions. They want to be the only ones who look at it. And I get it. I see why they do that. We don't. We're a small press. We're not able to pay advances. I didn't talk about what advances are, but that's a loan that the company gives you against the money they think it's going to make. And so those are not just the big five, but the larger small presses as well can pay in advance, where they'll say, here's a chunk of money that you can use to advertise this book to live on for a year while you write your next book. Your first advance is not going to even be enough to live on, probably. But that's great. And so if you are thinking my book is going to get me an advance, by all means, we say go with our blessing, right? That's great. Do that. Go for it. Shoot for the moon. That's wonderful. But because we don't have the financial resources to pay a big advance, we accept simultaneous submissions. So somebody can send it to us and send it to 3 other small presses and 5 other agents, and maybe we get back to them first. And then what we offer is cover, layout, printing, distribution, press, marketing, everything we can. We cover it, right? We never charge authors I shouldn't say anything. If an author comes to us and says, I want to go on a book tour and I'm going to stay in, 10 different hotels and I'm going to need airfare and we can't afford that, right? So we offer logistical support and help, but we can't do, there are things we can't do. Similarly, sometimes authors will say, I want my book to be submitted to the following 50 contests. And we have to say, those all cost, $100 a piece. Like, we have to be a little more selective. But we never say to an author, you should pay X or Y, right? It is our job to cover things, not to say to an author, you should cover things. And then the way that we make our bones, the way that we earn business is we say to, I just heard something rip. That makes me very nervous in a room full of books. What are you eating? Hey, what are you doing? Okay. I don't know what that piece of paper is. Making me nervous. You interrupted me. People who are listening are going to be very, very confused because they couldn't see me turn around. I'm talking to the dog now. But in a room full of books, when you hear paper tear, a little scary. Anyway, we earn our business by doing right by our authors. And one of the most rewarding things I've ever had is when I've signed authors and they've said to me, the reason I'm signing with you is I did my homework and I called around to your various authors. I communicated with them and they talked about how hard you work to get their books into readers' hands. That's very rewarding. So that's how we are building this NotAPipePublishing community. So we're going to go to our ad break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of other things that are coming up in the writing world for me in this next week, and how those relate to publishing and getting stuff out there published. But Doug, take it away. I'm rambling.
Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone: 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60 second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run 1 or 2 of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
Cold Rising. Algo and their team of enforcers take on the underbelly of Geneva megacity before being sent on a mission to Mars, a cesspit of corporate exploitation. Suong, a child laborer, must turn the heart of Agent Algo while the fate of Mars, her friends, and her family hang in the balance. Cold Rising. Cold Rush novella, available now on Amazon. No one wants to live in a country ruled by wizards, unless the alternative is worse. Peter Watts, author of Blindside, says, a near-perfect blend of implacable horror, gallows humour, and ecological apocalypse. Nick Namatis, author of The Second Shooter, says, relentlessly radical and often hilarious. Cascade, Book 1 in the Sleep of Reason trilogy, by Rachel A. Rosen. Available now at bookshop.org, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and at bppress.ca.
I'm realizing I need to do a better job of telling folks this. People can't know what we refuse to share. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. I've been doing a ton of work in my yard, and audiobooks have been my constant companions throughout. I know there are some people who say reading an audiobook doesn't count as reading. They are wrong. Reading with your ears requires some of the same skills as reading with your eyes, and some distinct skills, but it's still creating meaning from a text, and it counts. I have 5 of my books out in audiobook, on Audible and Amazon. The Convention of Fiends, Book 1, Don't Read This Book, and Book 2, You Were Warned. Corporate High School is narrated by Crystal Kay, and she did an amazing job. I narrated The Digital Storm with some cool voice changer software for some of the characters, so that sounds like a bit of an ensemble. And I recorded one of my collections of poetry, This Uneven Universe, as a gift for my wife Crystal, who wanted to be able to listen to it while driving. So if audiobooks are a way you enjoy reading, check those out. And if you like them, let me know, readers and reviewers.
Welcome back, everybody. So this coming weekend, I am going up to the Willamette Writers Conference, and I'll be presenting there at the Willamette Writers Conference. I get to do a workshop, and I get to moderate a panel. Really excited about moderating that panel. It's a bunch of phenomenal authors, and they're going to be talking about world building. Brian Parker, who I've had on the show, Jesse Kwok, who I've had on the show, and then Arwen, the author that I have not met, I know her first name is Arwen, is going to be on the panel. I've just looked at her books to kind of prepare myself, and I'm like, I really want to get her on the show because she seems really cool. But we get to talk about how they do world building, which is something I am personally very interested in learning, because my next work in progress, I'm finishing up book 3 of my first completed trilogy, which is exciting. And then, well, you all wait for that one to come out next summer. I'm going to be starting to work on an epic high fantasy, and I need to be learning all I can about how to develop a deep, rich world with all of its lore and geography and cultures and all that. And so I am excited to be moderating that panel. I'll be asking the audience, please take good notes for me, because I need to learn that too. I'm also going to be leading a workshop, and the workshop I'm leading is titled "Who Failed Whom? 7 Things Your High School English Teacher Should Have Taught You and Why They Didn't." And 7 things your high school English teacher lied to you about and why they did, or something to that effect. It's funny, little note about that. So I pitched it and then wrote it, because that's what you do, right? You say, this is the presentation I'm going to give. And I've been practicing it and practicing it and practicing it, and I want it to be really good. And I'm wishing I hadn't said 7. I thought, oh, am I going to be able to fill this workshop? Oh, now it's going to be tight. Just those 7. It's going to be really full. I don't know if there will be time for as much Q&A as I would like. Might fill the entire time, but it's going to be really fun. So I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about writing conferences and writing organizations like Willamette Writers. Regardless of where you are watching this from, there is probably a writing group in your area. And if there's not one in your area, there is certainly one online that you could join, and you're online right now, right? So you have access to writing groups. And writing groups, whether they are huge, like the Willamette Writers, which covers all the way into Washington State, and then down into Northern California, and I mean, there are chapters all around the state of Oregon. It's this very, very large group. That's wonderful. Like that's cool to have access. Or it's a writing group that you put together, and that's 4 authors. That community is really important for us, because as writers, it can be very isolating.
And if you're watching this and you think of yourself more as a reader than a writer, understand that the writer who wrote that novel that you are enjoying, one of the challenges they had as they did that is they were working a lot of the time in isolation. And that affects the work, that affects the person, which then affects the work, right? And so writing communities are something that almost inevitably, invariably happens before that book is, sitting there in your lap. The person ended up working with a publisher, working with an editor, working with a sensitivity reader, so there are other people that are necessarily involved in the process. But while they were still in the drafting or revision phase of that book, they were also hopefully working with a writing community. And this is I get excited about Willamette Writers every year. This is I call it Writer Christmas. This is my time of year that I am the most excited about, more so than Christmas, more so than any holiday. Maybe with the possible exception of Halloween. I get really into Halloween. But I really love Willamette Writers. And that's because we get a whole bunch of writers who are weird folks, right? I mean, this is a bunch of people who sit around and write 300-page tomes about people who never existed for fun. Like, these are odd folks, and you put them all in one space, and it can be really, really fun and funny. We laugh a lot together. This year there will be karaoke, I have been assured, and I am absolute karaoke whore. So if there's karaoke to be sung, I will be doing some karaoke. I am just really excited about Willamette Writers this year. But I want to encourage folks out there, join your local group, support your local group. And if you are a writer, find that community. And if you're a reader, understand that writers need to find community, and that the book you're reading probably has influences of more than one person in it. Editors don't get credit. The beta readers, those people who gave feedback, don't get credit. Their name is not on the front. Maybe the person has a special thanks where they thank somebody for helping them, but often that is one of those things that gets cut for the sake of saving a few pennies and pages, right? And so you might not know that, but be aware of that in terms of, conceptually, be aware of the fact that there is a whole community that should be involved in producing a great book, because that is part of the process, and it's also part of the mental health of the writer you're reading. So I'm very excited about that. There was something kind of grim in our literary news today, and let's see, time-wise here. I don't know how long I've gone, so I'm not sure to what extent I should riff on this. But no, I'm going to save it. I'm not gonna criticize anybody for their online misbehavior today. I can save that for some other time. It may just come up naturally in conversation on a future episode. I do have some really wonderful guests that I am excited about coming up over the next. Let's see, we've got all our folks scheduled through the next month and a half, and we're gonna have some great guests on this show. So keep coming back. Thank you for being here, for touching base with us every week. And again, I know I've mentioned this before, but please give the show a little thumbs up or a rating. There's somebody out there, I've mentioned this on the show before, who always downvotes the YouTube version of the show. And I don't part of me just feels really sorry for this person. Like, I don't have the energy to keep coming back to tell somebody, hey, I don't like you. Like, that sounds really awful to me. Like if there was a show I didn't like, I wouldn't go watch it every week and say I don't like this. But there's somebody who does, and it throws off the algorithm. Some great writer comes on this show. They've got a debut out there. They're a very nice person, and the show gets downvoted 2 times before they they get a chance to even get their voice out there. because this one person right away shows up and downvotes from 2 different accounts. And so if you could make up for that by thumbs upping the show every week, you can go back and thumbs up whichever ones you want. That can be really helpful to help those authors get their video version seen. Similarly, if you can do that for, on whichever podcasting app you're listening to this on, it really does make a huge difference. It helps people find the show. And same thing for my books. If you get a chance to check them out and you enjoy them, please tell everyone you know. And if you don't like them, please keep that to yourself. It's totally fine. You don't need to spend your energy telling people what you don't like in this world. I wish Star Wars fans would figure that out. I love Star Wars, but the fan base tends to be really sour. If you don't like something, you can just not say anything, and that's okay. Unless there's some socially redeeming value to saying something, you don't have to speak out against the social injustice of I didn't like it. Like, you keep that to you. But if you enjoy my books, please, please let everybody know. I would really appreciate it. And now that I've tasked you with things that feel like homework, please remember your life needs spaces. Just like any good novel, the spaces are essential. So take some space this week, take some deep breaths, and know that I'm proud of you.
If I take my time.